should be good to go. Hopefully folks in chat can let me know if you guys can hear me all right. I'll wait for a check-in before I begin. Sound is on. Perfect. All right. How's the volume? Can you guys hear me okay? Very, very soft. All right, let me turn that up then. Thank you so much. Figure we'd do this really quickly first. And I'll definitely do what I can to adjust that really quickly. Give me 1 sec. It's going to go blue while I adjust the output. Okay. All right. Okay. Back in. Let me know if this works any better. Again, I appreciate the brief mic check at the beginning. All right, hopefully that's better. Hopefully you guys can hear me better. I adjusted the mic. Once I get confirmation, I'll get going. Much better. Perfect. Thank you so much for the check-in. All right, so we've got several goals for today's presentation. Thank you everyone for coming out. If at any point the sound cuts out, let me know and I'll repeat. I have my eyes on the chat, so just keep me informed, especially if I start going off on a tangent and you missed something important, do let me know. Our goals today are going to be to discuss commensal politics as sort of a complex term, how it fits into the world of archaeogaming, and then specifically using the case study of the Elder Scrolls Online. Specifically, using this case study while inside the Elder Scrolls Online, as it seemed the very best way to do it. What a better way to discuss something than to literally give you a live and in-person tour. Now, I promise I will keep an eye on the time. I won't let us run over because there's another excellent presentation at 6 o'clock. So I will keep everything nice and tidy. You'll be following me around on this shiny individual, and we'll be accompanied by my little Uggy Bird here. But we're going to start here. And before we even move in to the game itself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to, and this may be no surprise for those of you that are familiar with commensal politics, but pulling up the map here, I'm going to take you to a tavern. So we're going to head here to the map up to the crossroads, just for anyone who's following along in ESO itself. If anyone's on PlayStation and wants to come along for the walking tour, you are welcome to join up with me.
Doesn't make sense.
And we are going to head inside.
Island apart, looking for something they...
Now there is a bit of a lag, so I will make sure that everything is totally still and good on everyone's side. I'm going to turn off the HUD right now just so that there's no distraction. And then we should be good to go. For anyone that's currently watching on my own channel, I definitely recommend that you head over to the Archeo Gaming channel. They're hosting this right now, and they've done an expert job of it. They are definitely sound and technology wizards, and they figured this out far better than me. So I would head over there. That's where a lot of our discussion is going to be. All right, so we are inside a tavern. Why are we starting here? Because commensality is, in essence, the study of food, and it encompasses drinking as well. And it connects to the larger theme of commensal politics. Now, commensal politics is the structured sharing of food and drink with the ultimate goal of some sort of social negotiation. Now, this may seem very dense and complex, but what this basically means is that you invite someone to partake of food or drink, and you hope to get something out of it. We do this all the time today. And so starting this off, this presentation about commensality in a tavern is ideal. If ever you found someone attractive and you wanted to invite them out for drinks, or you wanted to invite them out for a coffee, you were practicing commensal politics. You hoped that over a little bit of liquid courage, or perhaps a nice warm cup of coffee or tea, you might get to know each other a little bit better, and perhaps things might go a little bit further. If you are on an interview and you're taken out to lunch or you're taken out to dinner, you are given food and drink, and often the choices that you make or the things available or the place that you're taken is factored in, either to show the money that's on the budget, to impress you, to give you an idea of the local flavor. And you in turn have to show that you do in fact know how to use utensils and not wear most of your food. But the goal is that you can advance a little bit further. Often you are taken out for celebratory dinners. When you graduate, when you get married, even for things like funerals, right, to commemorate and celebrate a life, there's often food and drink involved. All of this represents aspects of commensal politics. So hopefully this is making sense. Hopefully there's no cutouts on the mic. And these aspects are what we're going to look at today. In particular, what we're going to look at today, with the somewhat nerdy title of the talk, paying tribute to commensality, is we're going to look at the way commensal politics function within the world of the Elder Scrolls Online. And we're going to look at the way that they have chosen, they being the developers, to situate this new form of interaction with non-playable characters, NPCs, and with other players within the auspices of drinking spaces, thus combining sociability, interaction, and food and drink. These are facets that those of us that study taverns and saloons, inns and bars, mead halls and banquet areas, all of these, we already understand. But to see this represented in the digital world, in what would be in essence a fantasy world, it's fantastic, because it's part of what makes it feel just a little bit more real, because it's drawing on a long history, a long human history, and what we know from archaeology, by situating this game, called Tales of Tribute, within drinking spaces. Alright, so hopefully the sound is still good. If not, again, feel free to weigh in. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're here in the tavern, and this place that we're at, when I open up the map, there's a bit of a lag, so you should see it in just a moment. And when we open up this map, what we end up seeing is that we're currently in a place known as Gonfalon Bay. Now, Gonfalon Bay is part of a larger Sistrus archipelago. It's this collection of islands, and this is a big trading hub. Where we are right now is at the Ancient Anchor. And that's an important thing to note, and it's something we'll keep pointing out as we get to other places. Now, when we go over here to the bartender, one of the key things that I want to point out is some of his dialogue. He discusses commensality and the fact that this is a port city by making reference to the number of people that come in, the types of people that come in, and the trade routes. So we're going to take a listen to this.
I grew up in the shadow of Red Mountain. Active vents. The Colossus brought thousands of visitors.
Of course, as all things work, now he's glitching out and doing different dialogue, so I love that. So his main dialogue that he usually says is the first one is he tells everybody to pick whatever they want, because it doesn't matter whether you're a nobleman or a sailor fresh off the boat, you'll eventually end up here at this tavern. And then he continues by saying, however, whatever it is you're trying to find, decide quickly, because if you wait too long, we may not have it in stock. Yes, working as Zos intended. This is always true. Yes. And so this is also true. This is one of the great weights that we get in these port cities, where often what you pick to eat or drink is constrained both by what you have to access financially, but also what you have to hand based on supply lines. And so in a port city like this, especially one that is frequented heavily by nobles, we're going to have a vast array of things available to us, and it's really going to be more your coin that determines what you can get. However, because this is still an island location, it's still technically a frontier location. It's distanced from the very heart of this larger government, which is on the mainland. There are going to be supply chain issues, and as such, it is still important to make a decision somewhat quickly, no matter how much you have in your purse, because there is that pressure, that constant flow, that wax and waning of goods. All right. Hopefully some of the other ones that I visited just last week will still chat with us appropriately. So this is where we were starting out. We're now going to move on. And we're going to get into some of our examples. Let me know if the camera makes you dizzy at any point. All right, from here we are going to head to a place known as Shimmerine. Now, Shimmerine is located on the Somerset Isles. This is the home of the High Elves. And what's important to know about that in the concept of this particular world is that this is a group of individuals, a race that is incredibly insular. And in addition to that, they also have an incredibly long history. This area is strewn with ruins, and we're heading here because some of these aspects of commensal politics will take place here just like they did in the previous place, and this is the first place we're going to see an instance of this Tales of Tribute, and then we'll move on from here. And yes, yeah, I see the comment about NPCs. That is in fact the way of the world. So we're going to head in, and just so anyone who may be following along is interested, we're heading to this one here, Anchors Away. The other one had anchor in its name too, also down by the water, and this is important. Our drinking spaces are down by the water. We're going to go on foot. When I did a practice round, I was told that when I was on the mount, it was a little dizzying, so we're going on foot, so bear in mind it may be just a little slow. But we're heading down to the water. Why? Because if anyone up here in sort of the very fancy part, sort of the Saks Fifth Avenue area of this town wanted to get a drink, they could head down to it, but it's an easy stop for anyone coming right off of any of the merchant ships or any of the military ships. So this is where we're going to be headed. Now, Shimmerine is the capital city, so it's very, very beautiful, and it's where a lot of governmental things take place. We're going to take a cut down an alleyway here. And while not the largest city, it's certainly the seat of the government. And here we are. I'd like to point out, before we get to the tavern itself, that you can see the docks right there. I'll point at them. And you can see, here's the ship right up ahead. So very, very close to the docks. You can see them right here. Here's the big retaining wall. So this is a port city. And again, I see it says that a few folks are watching on my channel. I highly recommend that you guys head over to the Argicon channel, to Archeo Gaming's official channel, and watch there. That's where a lot of the conversation is taking place. All right, so we're going to enter Anchors Away. All right, so now we're inside. This is a seaside tavern. It does cater largely to those at the docks. However, because we're still in the capital city, some of the trappings that we'll see is we're going to see architecture that is very, very unique to these people called the High Elves or the Aldmer. When you speak with this individual here, he actually bemoans various people that are coming in, but he speaks to the vast variety of folks that have now entered now that the Isles have opened their borders. And if you are a fellow High Elf, he speaks to you one way. And if you're not, he actually speaks to you a completely different way. And so this racial dialogue is really interesting as far as showing how commensality works, because this is the person from whom you would, in theory, get something to drink. And yet, he is more or less willing to give it to you, to literally engage in the beginning parts of whatever commensal activities you want to engage in with anyone else based on your race. Now, once we move in to the tavern itself, we will see this. And this is what I brought you here to show first and foremost. We're going to go into first-person mode. Nobody get dizzy. And what you can see set up here is a card game. Now, if you're like me, I'm sure you have played plenty of card games in coffee shops, in taverns, in bars. It's often something to do with friends or with family. You might do it for fun. You intentionally bring cards along. You might do it to pass the time. Often people get together in bars to play cards. And sometimes you're just hanging out in a bar and someone pulls out a pack of cards. So this is not at all surprising that here we are in this seat of sociability, this alcohol-laced environment. Here we see the cards laid out. And this is a game known as Tales of Tribute. Now, this was introduced just recently in the most recent DLC, the chapter that came out. And what's fascinating about this is that this is a game where you leverage money and power to ultimately win. So now, sitting over a table accompanied by alcohol, right here, I could steal this if I wanted to. We are talking about leveraging money and power. This is a concrete, physical example of commensal politics, played out almost charade-like through Tales of Tribute. I like the racial interactions too. I just see your comment right now. There's a comment from Archie Fantasies saying that they like the racial interactions. I do too, because it does make the world feel more holistic. If everything was completely numb to it, it wouldn't feel real, because regrettably we have racial interactions in our world. We're trying not to, but there is prejudice and there is favoritism. And experiencing that in another world reinforces the fact that there are very real differences, that the difference between race number 1 and race number 2 is not just cosmetic. So going back to Tales of Tribute, you leverage money and you leverage power over a series of games where you deal out the cards, and eventually the first person to hit, and I love this too as a scholar of power, to hit the highest number of prestige wins. Now normally when you are doing commensal politics within the auspices of a tavern or a drinking space, you are trying to negotiate for social prestige. In fact, these types of bar-based feasts in the archaeological record are often referred to as prestige negotiations, and the things that are used within them are often referred to as prestige items. So the fact that you're sitting at a bar and you're playing using money and power, hoping to secure enough prestige to win, is absolutely perfect and is an excellent metaphor for what happens when two people sit down across from one another. The other thing that I really like about this game is that the various people that you can play are of a wide variety of races. And this shows that within the walls of the tavern, after enough alcohol and with enough money and power and securing enough prestige, anybody can be on equal footing. And so we have over here, this is one race, this is a wood elf. So again, not local to this area. Over here we have a Khajiit. This is another one that is not local to the area. And then over here, an Argonian, I think is back there. Yes, so one of the lizard people, not local to this area. And then over here, we have an orc, again, not local to this area. Now the one thing to point out, they are all finely dressed because this is the capital city. And so you can see some outside influence still coming through, but in a place where the bartender doesn't even necessarily want to be kind to you if you are not part of the in crowd over a game of tribute. Everyone is equal, and of course they all pretty much have either money or drink in hand. So looking back at the questions, I see one here that says a bit more of a general question, but I'm curious as to how real-life research has influenced how you view the taverns in game, and on the flip side, how ESO influences real interpretations of taverns. So that is an absolutely phenomenal question, and I am happy to answer it. So my real-life research absolutely affects how I view taverns in the game, because I am an archaeologist of commensality, of commensal politics, and my research focuses heavily on drinking spaces, whether they are taverns or inns or saloons. And so I have looked at the drinking spaces within the world of the Elder Scrolls, both the single-player games and this, Elder Scrolls Online, for quite some time. And there is a very developed history to the Elder Scrolls franchise, and I think that it helps from an archaeological perspective because it gives us things upon which we can build in the digital and fictional sense, the same way that we can build upon that information here, what we would consider IRL, right, real life. But also, as far as how ESO influences my research, so going back the other way, I would say that Elder Scrolls itself doesn't so much influence my studying of taverns. Things I see in Elder Scrolls don't affect my interpretations of taverns that I excavate. However, I do bring up the Elder Scrolls, having seen its interaction often when I am talking with people and I'm trying to come up with something where there may be some sort of commonality, some way to get things across. I might give an example and then draw from the Elder Scrolls or from something similar, sort of fantasy tavern context, because this often seems to convey a lot of the points a lot better than a hyper-specific context looking at one particular tavern on the shores of this particular city no one has heard of in this time period that people perhaps are not interested in. And so in that way, having a wider audience does give more people the opportunity to connect. So it's an absolutely fantastic question. All right, so we've pointed out here now the facets of Tribute, of this card game, that you literally leverage power and you leverage money in the hopes of gaining enough prestige, and you do it in an alcohol-saturated environment. So we see it here in the capital city. We're going to move on and see that this is not a unique case study. And by the way, that was an excellent question. If you have any follow-ups for it, please don't hesitate to let me know. All right. So from here, we are going to travel to a completely different place, just to put those in perspective who perhaps have not played this game or are not familiar with the Elder Scrolls franchise. This is the main continent upon which most things take place. This is known as Tamriel. This is the mainland. We were just over here, the Somerset Isles. Before that, we were here in the Sisters Archipelago, this little tiny island up there. So we are now going to head all the way over here to a frontier location. So the absolute opposite of an isolationist capital city. We are traveling. Would that we could fast travel in real life? Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you asked. So while we're traveling, while you're having this load screen, I figure I would fill you all in on this particular location. We are now in the city of Stormhold, within the larger area known as Shadowfen. And I've pulled up the map briefly, and hopefully you'll be able to see that. Now, Shadowfen is on the border between one racial set of lands ancestrally and another racial set of lands ancestrally. And as a result, we get the influence architecturally of both groups, because this is wholly and completely a borderland. The further north that we go, the closer it is to the people that are in the north, one group. The further south that we go, the more the architecture and the environment starts to look like that of the group to the south, a wildly different culture. And there is a third culture that we will see as we move through that are no longer here. They were kicked out of the lands. They came in as a conquering force and were driven out, but their ruins remain. And so it's in this place, this contested frontier with an embattled history, that we're heading once again to a drinking space to examine what happens with commensality. So again, for anyone that may be following along, we're heading here to the drinking space, and away we go. And again, I will go on foot so as not to make anybody dizzy. We're going to take something of a circuitous route so that you can get a glimpse of some of this architecture. The different cultures that we have here are Dark Elf, and this is very traditionally Dark Elf here, this building, and what's known as Argonian. These are the lizard people. We'll see some of that later on. And those ruins, you can see them here, this bridge, these archways. These are from a group known as the Aliads that were driven out. And so as we walk along, we see the clash of three different cultures, along with my little dancing bird. And it really shows us that feel of the frontier. Now we are heading down again, all the way over here, to the drinking space.
Sanctioned killers on our doorstep.
Now, what I'd like to point out is that we just walked through a lot of sort of what might be considered official or commercial buildings behind us, and they're either in the ruins of the conquering people who were kicked out, or they are in Dark Elf fashion. This drinking space here, open to everyone, and I'll pan slowly, and the building next to it to the left are in traditional Argonian, or more local style. And so already we're getting this clash of different cultures, and yet it's called the Coin Brothers Corner Club, and this again is very much characteristic of that northern group, those dark elves. Now the dark elves were known for enslaving the Argonians, the people to the south. In theory, by this time in the timeline, they've given up that practice, but this frontier area is incredibly fraught with tension as a result. So we're going to head in. And I'm going to head into first person. I'll wait and see if the feed catches up to see if we've got any questions. Hopefully there's no mic skipping. I know there's a bit of a lag between the broadcast and real time, so do let me know if anything ends up being problematic. I appreciate it. All right, now that we're inside, this definitely looks very traditionally Argonian. Again, for those of you not familiar with the Elder Scrolls franchise, these are Argonians, these lizard folk here. And again, just for those watching, I see a notice again that some folks are on my own channel. I highly recommend you heading over to the Archeo Gaming Collective's channel, which is generously hosting it this way. All right, so once inside, we notice that we have a lot of things being sort of hung out to dry. We have a lot of cuisine that's being prepared in this traditional Argonian or sort of southern way. We've got this little guy hanging out who's just adorable. The candles, right, the lighting is traditional. These drip candles, and yet, here we are. Once again, we've got traditional sort of Argonian seating happening, but we're back to tribute. So here we are in a clash of cultures on the frontier and within the drinking space. What is taking place? Interaction between different groups of people, sociability, connection over alcohol. Someone has brought their own tankard again, and yet over here someone is drinking out of a traditional Argonian cup. It looks very likely that they are embracing the local fare. And once again, they are playing this game that simulates negotiating power and money in exchange for prestige. And so even on the frontier, where no longer do we have polished flagstones, but we have just straw thrown down on the ground, we still have folks gathered, and once again, a wide variety of different races that we would see on the continent, and entirely different from the ones we saw before. So we have here a Nord from the far norths. Over here, this is from the far west. This is a Breton woman. So both human races, and another human here. This is a Red Guard from the west and south. And so they've all gathered. They have no connection whatsoever to the actual local environment. They are neither the previously conquering people that are now gone, those aliens, nor are they one of that pair of fraught races, the former slavers, the dark elves, and the former enslaved, the Argonians. These are here on the frontier to socialize, to play games, to gather over alcohol, with food in close proximity. I'll take this moment to stop and ask if there are any questions. And if there aren't any in the chat, we'll move on to our next place. All right, feel free to ask them if you have them. And if not, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to head to the next one. So we're going to leave this corner club behind and head to an entirely different frontier.
Heard the Shadow Scales are taking any more contracts.
Shh. You think no contracts means no ears in town?
Back through the ruins we go. Again, just want to point out this sort of clash of architecture. Trying to be moderate with my speed so I don't make anyone dizzy. And we're going to head to an entirely different frontier. This time we're heading to a place known as Bankurai. And we are heading to Evermore. Now, I told you before to look for the boats. When we were at that corner club previously, heading back to the map, you could see that we were actually somewhat inland, and yet this is a major river. And all along this river, massive boats came in, and they would, in fact, dock here in this city of Stormhold. And I've left the marker up just to show it in proximity to the water, that this corner club that we were at is not so terribly far from the water. It still would have been an excellent access point for river traders. Now here in Evermore, we're in an entirely different type of frontier with a very different look to it. So Evermore is a large city within a land known as Bankurai. And I'd like to point out, there's a ship big enough to make it onto the map. Our docks are here. Our tavern is here. Once again, anchor is in the name. But if we back out just a bit to better understand the region of Bankurai that we are in, it too straddles some very different areas. Down in the south is a desert-like region that is just starting to kiss the Great Alakir Desert. If we head further west, we start to get to the cold forested lands of Daggerfall. And if we head up here toward the north, we start to get just to the very edges of what are eventually known as the Reach, and finally Skyrim. And so once more we have a clash of three different cultures. And in fact, they're the three different cultures that we saw in the preceding tavern. So those red guards are the desert people that dwell just beyond the map down here. The Bretons dwell just beyond here. Their culture is very similar to that of medieval France and medieval England. And then up here are the Nords, and their culture is very similar sort of to what we might think of when we think of Sweden or Denmark in particular. A little bit Icelandic. So we have this clash of cultures, and where we are right now, Evermore, is on the great body of water here. And so we're closer to this Breton side and to this Nordic side, and we're going to see that most in the architecture. All right, let's go.
You're just the type Sergeant Antibes is looking for.
So we're going to head into the town itself. This should have an incredibly different feel than where we were before. The half-timbered houses are very characteristic of Breton architecture. Again, the people to the west in Daggerfall.
Could you help me out?
And once more, just to indicate where we're going, it's this right here. This anchor's point. We're going to take this roundabout and head back that way. But you can see here's this half-timbered house. heavy fortifications, and yet a lot of the grill work that we see here is much more reminiscent, not so much of what we would find in Daggerfall, but of what we would see much further south in the Alec here. So heading back around to our tavern, once again we are in view of the great ships, right? There they are, sitting at dock. So quick and easy access. I'm glad you're getting nostalgic watching. And now we're going to head in to the building proper. So again, this is very traditional Breton. That's that Western people. And again, keeping the different races in mind, the different peoples, the different cultures, is not nearly as important for those of you that are not big into the Elder Scrolls as it is to point out that we basically have something that's very traditionally insert one culture here, and then we're going to get these clashes or sometimes blendings of cultures as we move in, and they happen in particular in the drinking spaces. So in we go. Once inside, you can already see we've got several different people in here. Right, this is an Argonian, the place we were just at. Got a rather intimidating name. And what I absolutely adore about this particular tavern is that this one is modeled a lot like the taverns that you would see in port towns in the English and French colonial worlds, but especially the English colonial world. And this includes both England and her colonies. And as such, it makes it ideal to examine all kinds of commensality. Is it a turkey following me around? Sort of. This is a terror bird. He is adorably ugly, so I have named him Uggy Bird, and he follows me around because his homeliness makes me smile. And I love him, and he is a good companion, and he chirps at all of the right times. And he has come along on this walking tour because he's a good sport. So down here we have the central bar, which again, with the various kegs back there, is laid out just like we would see with the English colonial world. We have here a game of tribute taking place, and we'll come back to this. But I want to take you upstairs briefly, and I'm going to do what I can to move this camera as slowly and gently as possible so as not to make anyone sick, because you did not come here to be made sick. But this particular tavern has an upstairs. And the upstairs rooms were often used in taverns such as this, if we're looking at real-world correlates, either for those who wanted a place to sleep, or for those who wanted a private affair where they could pay by the hour. I'll let your imaginations fill in the details. But also they were used for private proceedings, whatever they may be, a gathering of individuals that they didn't want to take place downstairs. And these sorts of gatherings could be of a wide variety of things because it's quite easy to block entrance to the stairs. And as such, a layout like this is ideal for something that was very common in, say, the 18th century in England, something known as molly houses. Now, these were safe spaces for gay men and cross-dressers at a time when just simply being gay was worthy of capital punishment. And so they frequently would find these two-story drinking spaces. And the front of the house, if you will, the downstairs, would continue to operate without anyone any the wiser. And up here, people would finally get a chance to take off the mask and to be who they truly wanted to be when they didn't have society telling them how they had to be. They could speak with one another, they could flirt, they could act, they could rent a room. And this was the one true place where they could be themselves. And so this chance to be able to walk through a 2-story drinking space set up with the half timbers is so evocative for that very reason that I wanted to take us up here. Now, in another similar 2-story tavern, we actually end up having a game of tribute, and it's a championship game of tribute that you end up following all the way upstairs because it's special and exclusive. But I like this one best when just discussing the concept as a basic concept, because it really gives you an idea of just how many little places there are in these grand sweeping taverns where you can disappear and have your own quiet moments as well. So we're going to head back downstairs now. I see the comment that Uggy Bird is adorable. I'm so glad. I, too, adore Uggy Bird. He just parkoured off the stairs. But yes, Uggy Bird follows me everywhere. All right. So back here again. Here we are. Very close once again to the source of food and drink. Never do we find these at a great distance from any place where we could have food and drink. And once again, when we zoom in on the table, we've got a mug of frothy ale right here. And I'm not sure what they're drinking in here, but I want it, and so does my bird. But once again, you can see the game board. And speaking of Molly houses, Tamriel is not the kind of place that persecutes for any sort of homosexuality, for being non-binary, for being transgender. And it's actually something that I find delightful about this particular fictional world. There's plenty of problems in the world, but who you're choosing to spend the night with or who you're choosing to love is not one of them. And that's very evident by this individual here. People don't feel the need to have to hide things, and I love that about it. But once again, we have a wide variety of different individuals here. This is a Nord. Normally we see them as these overly masculine, very gruff often individuals. And so to have one be rather effeminate is really refreshing and really shows the broad scale of individuals that can be negotiating over food and drink. Here we have one of those high elves, once again on the frontier, instead of in those ancestral homelands where we started in that capital city. Yes, he's very high maintenance. And our last individual, here's our waitress here. And the last individual that I want to point out to you, although we can't play cards with him, sadly, is an orc over here. Now, orcish lands are not too far away from where we are. They're sort of north and west of us. And there was a lot of tension between the people directly to the west, the Bretons that you keep hearing me reference, and the orcs. And yet here in the frontiers, he feels perfectly comfortable to not only sit down and have a meal, right? He's got alcohol, he's got something to eat, but he's relaxed enough that he can turn his back to others and he can sit down and engage in reading. He's not on his guard. He is now because I'm talking about him. But this is really important because it shows that things are in flux on the frontier and that these strict racial lines don't always apply. And often where we can see almost as a microcosm of what's going on in the broader area, the state of things being in flux is within the drinking world, within these drinking spaces, and especially when it comes to commensality. So he feels comfortable enough to ignore people. The power to ignore is just as powerful as the power to be able to engage. So here, once again, they're playing cards, they're interacting with one another. There's a seat open. Any of us could sit down and take it. And this is incredibly exciting. Now, given the time and the bit of the lag, I know we started a little bit late, but we're at about 6 till. And so I'll check in with the con and kind of see where we're at to see if it's worth doing one more case study or not. Until then, I will leave you guys right here, see if you have any other questions. I think given that we're at about the 5-minute mark, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. We can totally check out Uggy Bird while we do it. But I'd love to take this time just to see if anyone has any questions. I had done a few practice streams on this content, and a lot of people were interested. And so if you are interested, I'm happy to do sort of more of these walking tours in the future. But do let me know. I'm happy to spend the rest of this time with questions.